Part 33. The Prince Longs for Me Every Night After Mastering Thought Reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 321. Changzi looked at her mistress's happy expression and felt that she was happy that His Highness would let her eat and drink as much as she wanted after His Highness came back. After Shen Shuwei shared his joy, he lowered his head and read it again. The letter is not long, I read it in a while. He told about the recent events, as well as the poisoning of the soldiers, and how her spiritual spring water was delivered promptly. Well, she sent the spiritual spring water to ensure that Xiao Jinyan was immune to all poisons. But it's good to be able to save so many elite soldiers. After seeing the last sentence, Shen Shuwei's lips unconsciously curved beautifully. Because Xiao Jinyan said he would be back soon. I haven't seen him for almost 3 months, and I really miss him. Shen Shuwei folded the letter and put it into the envelope. When no one was around, he put it into the space and put it together with the other 2 letters. Nap time. Shen Shu closed her eyes slightly and listened to the sound in her ears. The footsteps became farther and farther away, until she could no longer hear them. She opened one eye. After confirming that Changzi had left, she got up neatly and walked out of the room quietly. She walked cautiously to the small kitchen, looked around to make sure Changzi was not nearby, and then got into the small kitchen. The small kitchen is not large but has all the kitchen utensils. If there hadn't been electricity in ancient times, she would have even moved out ovens and other electrical appliances. But having said that, it is actually possible to generate electricity artificially, but it is a bit more troublesome. Shen Shuwei doesn't want to do this yet, and we'll talk about it later. She went straight to the cupboard, opened the cupboard door gently, took out the plate of braised pork inside, and took out a pair of chopsticks. Then he squatted in the corner and started eating braised pork. I had no choice but to eat it secretly as the housekeeper was watching me. Meow. Shen Shu paused for a moment while chewing, then raised his head and saw a pair of blue eyes staring at him on the window sill. They were very bright in the sunlight. Shen Shuwei hurriedly made a silence gesture, "Shh, don't scream, you will be discovered." Sichuan immediately shut his mouth. Everyone who sees it has a share. Shen Shuwei picked up a piece and handed it to Xuetuan. As soon as he put it down, Xuetuan ate it into his mouth. Shen Shuwei ate the braised pork in his mouth and couldn't help but give Sichuan 3 words, snack food. Xuetuan licked his lips. He just ate it in 1 bite and didn't taste it. It gave a slight meow to Shen Shu, indicating that it still wanted to eat. Shen Shuwei was not stingy and put 2 more braised pieces into the snow dumpling. Sichuan learned the lesson this time. He licked it first and found it very delicious. He opened his mouth and bit into half of it, then ate the remaining half again, and so on. 1 person and 1 cat, they finished most of the plate of braised pork in a short time. Shen Shuwei took out his handkerchief and wiped his mouth with satisfaction. Xuetuan also licked his paws with satisfaction. After it was over, Shen Shuwei looked at the empty plate. If Chun 11 saw it, he would definitely guess that she was eating secretly. At this time, she happened to see the little rabbit passing by the windowsill, and she called him in a low voice, "Little rabbit." Little rabbit had just come back from the vegetable garden. He heard the sound and saw Shen Shuwei in the window. "Little master, what are your orders for this slave?" Shen Shuwei said with some embarrassment, "Little rabbit, when Changzi asked later where the braised pork in the cupboard went, you said it was rancid and threw it away." Little rabbit looked at the plate in Shen Shuwei's hand. It was shiny and oily, and it could be seen that it contained braised pork. "Little master, is it bad to lie?" "It would be bad if the baby learns to lie." "Shen Shuwei, who told you?" "Changzi said it." Little rabbit said seriously, "My master is pregnant now, and prenatal education is very important." "Shen Shuwei, Changzi's publicity work is really good." The little rabbit said, "For the sake of the baby, I must be strict with myself." Shen Shuwei handed the empty plate to the little rabbit and said, "But I've already eaten it." The little rabbit stared at the empty plate for a few seconds. "Then forget it this time." Hearing this, Shen Shuwei happily handed the plate to the little rabbit, went back to the house, and slept peacefully. When Changzi found that most of the plate of braised pork was gone, she asked and found out that it had gone rancid. She was also a little puzzled. How could it go bad so easily? During dinner, because Shen Chu had recovered from the mild morning sickness, Changzi prepared some meat dishes, a combination of meat and vegetables, and balanced nutrition. Shen Chuwei was sitting at the dining table eating dinner, and heard Yu Chengzi say in confusion, "The temperature has been a little higher recently, and the vegetables can't be kept long." Shen Chuwei said to Chengzi with a guilty conscience, "Xia Tian, it's normal." "Yes, it's getting hotter and hotter." Chengzi picked up the round fan and fanned Shen Chu slightly. Shen Chuwei lowered her head and continued to eat the food in the bowl. When adding meat, she would take 2 pieces at a time. Even so, the sharp-eyed Chengzi still saw it. "Little master, eat less for the sake of the baby." Yes, Shen Chuwei responded with a guilty conscience. When the queen came, she brought a lot of food, many of which were not available in other palaces. Although the dog emperor has 3 palaces and 6 courtyards, he is still close to the queen in terms of food and clothing. Unless there is extra money, it is not available in other palaces. The queen feels that the position of queen is still useful. Shen Chuwei was so happy when she saw the queen coming and bringing so many delicious foods. "Queen, you are too kind to bring so much food." The queen looked at Shen Chuwei and kept staring at the plates of pastries. After spending so many times together, she could still tell that Shen Chuwei was a child who liked to eat. Did Shen Liangdi suffer any injustice? Talk to me, I will make the decision for you. The queen has been in the palace for decades. Although she entered the palace as the crown princess and then the queen, her journey was smooth and without any twists and turns. But she still knew the twists and turns, intrigues, and snobbery in the palace. Shen Chuwei told the truth, "I have not suffered any injustice. Xiaoxiang Pavilion is very good. Xiaoxiang Pavilion is quiet and adjacent to Xiun Pavilion. There is almost no worry about what to eat, not to mention leisure and comfort." The queen saw that Shen Chuwei did not tell the truth and thought she was afraid. "Really? But I see that you seem to have lost some weight recently. Is the food bad?" Shen Chuwei touched her face. "Has the queen also noticed that I have lost weight?" The queen nodded. "Well, my little face is pointed. Is it because I don't eat well?" If the queen was not present, Shen Chuwei would definitely pull Chun to complain. She has lost weight and needs to be nourished. In fact, Xiaoxiang Pavilion is not short of food. Qin Xiao often sends some fish and meat over. It's just that she had morning sickness some time ago and can't eat greasy food. She loves meat, and she hasn't eaten meat properly for so long. How can she not lose weight? I will eat more and gain weight in the future. Shen Chuwei deliberately emphasized her tone, just to let Chengzi know that she has lost weight and needs to eat more. Chengzi has been with Shen Chuwei for so long, how can she not hear what she means? But it is written very clearly in the prenatal education book that no matter what you eat, you need to eat in moderation, and excessive intake is not good. The queen stared at Shen Chuwei for a while, thinking of the misdiagnosis. She said, "Shen Liangdi, do you still remember the last time the royal doctor checked your pulse? The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 322. Shen Chuwei didn't know why the queen suddenly brought up this matter. Although she knew that it was Wang Yuyi's misdiagnosis, she didn't refute it. When the child is born, the misdiagnosis and rumors will naturally be broken. "I still remember." The queen comforted, "Don't take this matter to heart. Take care of yourself, and you will have a child in the future." As for Wang Yuyi's acceptance of bribes and deliberately saying that Shen Chuwei is not easy to conceive, The queen is not going to say it now. Shen Shuwei nodded, I know. After talking about these, the queen rubbed her hands secretly and proposed seriously, Shen Liangdi, how about eating hot pot for lunch? Shen Shuwei agreed immediately after hearing this, okay, eating hot pot in summer is the most suitable. She had a blessing in disguise when she fell into the water last time and had a hot pot. While the queen is here, she must eat it. If you miss this village, you will miss this shop. The queen smiled with relief, that's great. If you need any ingredients, ask Eunuch Ren to go to the imperial kitchen to get them. Shen Shuwei chuckled, turned her head and looked at Chengzi, and said confidently, Chengzi, please communicate with Eunuch Ren. I obey your order. What could Chengzi say? With the queen here, she was powerless. Chengzi worked quickly and prepared the hot pot ingredients in a short time. Once the ingredients were ready, the rest would be ready soon. There were watermelons, cherry tomatoes, and cucumbers in the small kitchen, and Chengzi put out a fruit platter. On the round dining table, there was a charcoal stove and hot soup was boiling in the pot. Chengzi placed the fruit platter in front of the queen and Shen Shuwei respectively. The queen looked at the fruit that looked like flowers in front of her and felt a little curious. The fruit is arranged in a beautiful and elegant way. Shen Shuwei said, the queen is really amazing. In my eyes, it's just a plate of food. The queen couldn't help laughing when she heard it, it's really a plate of food. Chengzi was responsible for picking up the dishes, while Shen Shuwei and the queen were responsible for eating. Eating hot pot and eating fruit at the same time. This time, the queen was carried out by the phoenix chariot again. Shen Shuwei wiped her mouth with satisfaction and then went to the couch for a nap. When the emperor came to Fenji Palace, he saw the queen riding the phoenix chariot back. The queen rarely rode the phoenix chariot in the palace. Suddenly riding the phoenix chariot, did something happen? At this time, the queen saw the emperor coming and got off the phoenix chariot. Because she was too full, she bowed slowly. Your Majesty. The emperor saw that the queen moved slowly and held her waist with one hand. He was too familiar with this action. The queen was like this when she was pregnant. The emperor stepped forward, took the queen's hand affectionately, and asked, Queen, are you feeling uncomfortable? The queen looked at the suddenly enthusiastic dog emperor, and said in a daze, I don't feel uncomfortable. The emperor knew that the queen was in a bad mood during this period, mostly because of menopause. Queen, we are an old couple, what can't you tell me? The queen looked at the dog emperor with disdain. If it weren't for the fact that he was the emperor, she would have left long ago. Every day, she was always looking for trouble. She was so enthusiastic now, probably because she had something to ask her. You are so beautiful. Your Majesty, I am really fine. The emperor subconsciously thought that the queen was angry and deliberately didn't tell him that she was pregnant. It's okay, he will cooperate with the queen first and pretend not to know. I will help you go in and rest for a while. The queen was confused and was led to Fenji Palace near the dog emperor, and then to the inner room nearby. The emperor glanced at the maids serving in the bedroom. You leave. Yes, the maids left one after another. After everyone left, the emperor called the queen by her nickname, Ling-er, come here, sit down and have a rest first. The queen was still confused, and was helped by the dog emperor to sit on the chaise longue. She looked up at the dog emperor, only to see him go to the table and pick up the teapot to pour water. Did the dog emperor forget to take medicine when he went out today? Ling-er, come, drink some water. The emperor came over with a teacup and handed it to the queen. On his handsome face, in addition to the traces of time, there was a trace of tenderness. The queen was stunned for a long time. How did the emperor have time to come here? I've been too busy recently and have no time to come to Fenji Palace to see you. Today I just happened to be free, so I came here. Because the prince led the army for him, once he returned to the pre-liberation period, no one helped him review the memorials, so he became busy. Is it because he was too busy and didn't see women, so he suddenly became gentle? No longer picky? The queen stared at the dog emperor suspiciously, trying to find out why he was abnormal. The emperor found that the queen's eyes were always staring at him, and he asked in confusion, "Ling-er, what's wrong with you?" "I'm fine." The queen took the teacup from the emperor's hand, handed it to her, and took a few bites of the food to calm down. The emperor said again, "Ling-er, if you feel uncomfortable, remember to ask the imperial doctor to take a look, okay?" The queen paused in drinking tea, and her forehead was full of question marks. What does the dog emperor mean? Asterisk. Shen Shuwei closed her eyes and touched her stomach while thinking. It has been 3 days since she had hot pot. In these 3 days, the food made by Chengzi was not spicy at all. The reason is that she has a fever. She hasn't eaten braised pork for 4 days. As the saying goes, 1 day without seeing you is like 3 months, and 4 days is like a year. Shen Shuwei heard footsteps, opened one eye, and saw Chengzi coming in, and she opened the other eye as well. "Chengzi, I've lost weight, and I should make up for it. My lady, I stewed an old hen the day before yesterday, and stewed spare ribs yesterday." "Isn't that enough?" Chengzi counted them one by one. Shen Shuwei smiled awkwardly, "How can I just stew it? It has to be braised." The last 2 words were emphasized deliberately. Chengzi knew from Shen Shuwei's expression that the lady was craving for braised pork again. "My lady, can I make braised pork tomorrow?" Shen Shuwei said, "No braised pork, I want braised spare ribs, not greasy." Chengzi paused after hearing this, then braised spare ribs. For dinner, Shen Shuwei ate braised spare ribs as she wished, ate 3 bowls of rice, and ate most of a plate of spare ribs. Shen Shuwei only did 3 things a day: sleeping, eating, and painting. Today, she was painting, and the queen came. Shen Shuwei put away the painting to welcome the queen. Behind the queen, Qing Ying was fanning with a round fan, and she felt very hot. There was no ice in Xiaoxiang Pavilion, so it must be even hotter. "I ask someone to send you some ice cubes, so you can feel cooler in the summer." When Shen Shuwei heard that there were ice cubes, she raised her eyebrows happily, "Thank you, Queen." When the queen came closer, Shen Shuwei smelled a faint musk. She raised her handkerchief to cover her nose. "Queen, did you use musk?" The queen shook her head in confusion. "No, although I don't know medicine, musk is harmful to women's bodies." "Why would I use it?" Shen Shuwei sniffed around the queen and looked at the sachet on her waist. She pointed at the sachet and said, "Queen, there is musk in the sachet." Just then, Eunuch Ren trotted in. "Queen, something happened. Concubine Ning had a difficult delivery. I'm afraid the prince can't be saved." "Good evening, my dears. This is the extra chapter for yesterday's recommendation and monthly votes. Yesterday's votes almost made it impossible to add more chapters. Continue to ask for support from monthly and recommendation votes. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 323. At the same time, Ningyu Palace. Ah! It hurts. The woman's heartbreaking screams echoed throughout the Ningyu Palace. "Mom, please work harder." The maids were busy, bringing pot after pot of hot water, and the atmosphere was very tense. The emperor strode into Ningyu Palace. Hearing concubine Ning's heart-rending shouts, he paced back and forth worriedly. What exactly is going on? Sui he stepped forward and replied, back to the emperor, "Your Majesty was having a nice chat with the queen just now." After the queen left, the queen began to have abdominal pain. The imperial doctor said it was fetal gas. The emperor frowned and asked in a cold voice, "Okay, why did you get fetal gas?" "My slave, I heard from the imperial doctor that the empress had fetal gas due to inhaling too much musk," Sui said. When the emperor heard about musk, his eyes turned cold. "Why does concubine Ning know how to use musk? You slaves, how come you don't even know that women can't use musk? How do you take care of your master?" Sui knelt on the ground with a plop and said aggrievedly, "Your Majesty, concubine Ning's daily necessities for eating and drinking are carefully taken care of by the servants. Musk has never been used." The imperial doctor also checked and found no musk in the house. "It may be." The emperor asked, "What could it be?" Sui said, "The imperial doctor said that maybe someone else had something with musk on them, and the empress inhaled the musk after being together for a long time. But only the empress came here just now." The emperor interrupted Sui in a cold voice, "You mean, the queen is wearing something containing musk?" Sui kowtowed quickly, "I don't dare. It's the imperial doctor's guess, and I don't know." The imperial doctor hurriedly walked out of it and knelt on the ground with a plop, "Your Majesty." The emperor asked coldly, "How is the prince?" "Your Majesty, the prince had a difficult childbirth and died." After the imperial doctor finished speaking, he knelt down. The emperor's eyes were gloomy, and for a moment he couldn't accept that his full-term son was gone. He glanced coldly at the imperial doctor on the ground. "How is this possible? I saw him fine this morning, why is he gone now?" "Your Majesty, musk is very harmful to women, especially those who are pregnant. It can easily lead to miscarriage," the imperial doctor said tremblingly. The emperor was startled when he heard this. After the inside was packed, the emperor stepped inside. Even after cleaning up and lighting incense, you can still smell the smell of blood. Concubine Ning had just given birth and was lying on the bed exhausted. Her messy hair was wet with sweat and stuck to her forehead. The emperor came over and looked down at concubine Ning. She looked beautiful. Even after giving birth, she still showed a morbid beauty. He comforted her gently, "If there are no children, there will still be children in the future." When concubine Ning saw the emperor, she cried out in grievance, "Your Majesty, the prince I have been waiting for so hard is gone, I don't want to live anymore." Concubine Ning was pretty and bright, and she had just given birth, and her voice was so hoarse that it made people feel heartbroken. "What nonsense are you talking about? You're still so young. If you take good care of your health, you'll still be able to do it in the future." Asterisk. Concubine Ning was the most favored concubine, and this pregnancy also attracted much attention. The emperor was also looking forward to the arrival of the little prince. If it cannot be saved, the emperor may not be able to accept it. The queen asked sternly, "I was fine when I went to her palace just now, so why is it suddenly difficult to give birth?" I don't know. News just came from Ningyu Palace that concubine Ning is having a difficult childbirth and the prince is in danger," eunuch Ren said cautiously. The queen frowned. "Has the imperial doctor gone?" The imperial doctor happened to be asking for Pingan's pulse and was trying to think of a way to treat her, said Mr. Ren. The queen looked at Shen Shuwei solemnly. "This matter concerns Long Si. I will go to Ningyu Palace to have a look." After the queen finished speaking, she ordered, "Show off to Ningyu Palace." Shen Shuwei took a step forward and called to the queen, "Queen, please wait." The queen paused and looked back at Shen Shuwei. "Is there anything else wrong with Shen Liangdi?" Shen Shuwei pointed at the sachet and said, "Queen, please change the sachet." The queen asked doubtfully, "Why do you need to replace the sachet?" "Because of the musk, concubine Ning's fetal movement caused dystocia, which is related to this." Shen Shuwei also learned from the chat between the queen and eunuch Ren. After all, the queen has been in the palace for decades. After hearing what Shen Shuwei said, everything can be connected together. No wonder concubine Ning called her over for a chat early this morning, talking about nightmares and fear. saying that she had given birth to 2 sons, so she should have experience. It turned out that he deliberately wanted to frame her for murdering the emperor's heir, so that the emperor would punish her. Murdering the emperor's heir was a serious crime, but I didn't realize that such a fragile person as concubine Ning had such great ambitions. The queen took off the sachet and was about to throw it away. Shen Shuwei stopped her and said, "Queen, give me to my concubine." The queen looked at Shen Shuwei doubtfully. "What do you want this for? Musk is not good for women, and it will also affect future pregnancy." I know. Shen Shuwei turned around and came to the cabinet, took out a mask and disposable gloves, walked over again, picked up the sachet in the queen's hand, poured out the powder inside, and took out some sleeping powder. "Go in." The queen stood aside and looked at Shen Shuwei's actions in confusion. Shen Shuwei handed the pack sachet to the queen's hand. "The musk inside is gone, so I refilled it with some sleeping powder." The queen raised her eyes and glanced at Shen Shuwei, then tied the sachet to her girdle again. Shen Shuwei took out her homemade sachet, opened it, took out the powder from it, grabbed it, and sprinkled it on the queen. The queen looked at Shen Shuwei's actions in confusion. "What are you doing?" Shen Shuwei explained while sprinkling the powder. "The queen has a strong musky smell, and the imperial doctor can smell it at a glance." "So that's it." The queen couldn't help but look at Shen Shuwei a few more times. She didn't expect that she had such a careful side. Asterisk. When the queen stepped into Ningyu Palace, she heard the woman's soft cry, and even she, a woman, would be moved. Walking into the inner room, I saw the emperor sitting at the head of the bed, hugging the delicate body of concubine Ning, and gently stroking concubine Ning's back with his big hands as if to comfort her. "Your Majesty, I learned that concubine Ning had given birth, so I hurried over." The queen glanced at the room, but didn't see the child, so it was hard to say. The emperor looked up at the queen when he heard the voice. "Queen, you are here." The queen glanced at concubine Ning, only to see that her eyes were red and swollen from crying, and she was in a bad mood, perhaps because she was too sad. "Is concubine Ning okay?" The emperor said sadly. "The prince was not saved." The queen comforted him. "Don't be sad, Your Majesty. Concubine Ning is still young and there will be a future." "Your Majesty, what you said is nice." Concubine Ning just cried sadly. "Before the queen came, I was fine. After the queen came and sat for a while, I had a miscarriage. Is it a coincidence?" The queen looked at concubine Ning, crying pitifully, and now the fox's tail was about to be exposed. "The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Iyun Si. Chapter 324. Concubine Ning, what do you mean by this? The queen deliberately followed concubine Ning's words because she was afraid that concubine Ning would not mention it. "What do you mean by concubine? Shouldn't the empress know better?" As soon as the empress left, the doctor came to ask for Pingan's pulse and smelled a strong musky smell. This concubine would not have it in her house. "It's the empress. It's only after I came here." Concubine Ning cried with pear blossoms and rain. "Your Majesty, you have to make the decision for me, my concubine, and our prince." The queen sneered. "Concubine Ning, I used to think that you could only act coquettishly to seduce the emperor, but I didn't realize that you are so scheming, that you dare to frame me even." Concubine Ning held the emperor's hand and felt extremely aggrieved. "Your Majesty, my concubine's prince died in mysterious circumstances, Your Majesty." The emperor stared at concubine Ning with cold eyes. "Concubine Ning, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't talk nonsense. How could the queen murder the prince? It's impossible for the queen to wear musk on her body." The queen looked at the dog emperor, feeling embarrassed that he still spoke for her in front of her beloved concubine. She thought the dog emperor would directly ask questions. Concubine Ning said weakly, "Your Majesty, if you ask the imperial doctor to come and take a look, you will know that I am not telling lies." I also think it would be best to have the imperial doctor come and take a look. The queen turned to look at the door and said, "Call the imperial doctor in." The doctor at the door bowed and walked in. The queen glanced at the imperial doctor who came in and said, "Concubine Ning said that I have musk on my body. As an imperial doctor, you should know it as soon as you smell it." "I obey my orders." The imperial doctor took 2 steps forward and smelled carefully at the queen's side. Concubine Ning looked at the queen and sneered in her heart, "You can't escape the charge of murdering the prince this time." The emperor also watched, until the imperial doctor stepped away, and he asked coldly, "How is it?" In front of the emperor, the imperial doctor did not dare to lie. Back to the emperor, "The queen does not smell of musk." When concubine Ning heard this, she looked at the sachet on the queen's body. There was obviously a lot of musk in the sachet. How could the imperial doctor not smell it? She pointed at the sachet and said, "Physician, please take off the sachet and smell it." The queen took off the sachet herself and threw it into the doctor's hand carelessly. "Smell it." The imperial doctor smelled the sachet in his hand carefully, then shook his head. "There is no musk." The emperor guessed that the queen would not do this. Even if she could not tolerate concubine Ning's child, she would not make fun of the child in her belly. Before concubine Ning realized what was going on, the queen ordered again, "Call the other imperial doctors from the imperial hospital to come over and check the cause of the prince's death." Here Qingying walked out quickly. Concubine Ning grabbed the emperor's arm with her chin in fright. "Your Majesty, the emperor died miserably. He was just laid to rest in the earth. Now he has to be dug up. How can he be reincarnated with peace of mind?" Concubine Ning pointed angrily at the queen. "Queen, you are so cruel. You can just be jealous of my favor. You won't even let go of my child." The emperor's eyes turned cold. "She is the queen, how can you be so disrespectful?" Concubine Ning was startled and shouted coquettishly, "Your Majesty, your son has just been buried and cannot be dug out. Listen to the queen and find out the cause of death." The emperor knew that the queen had recently gone through menopause and had a bad temper. She was pregnant and her temper was even worse, so it was best to follow her. The dead prince was dug up just after he was buried. 2 imperial doctors examined and diagnosed the prince, saying, "The skin on his body is severely dark and purple. He has been dead for at least a day." The emperor immediately became angry when he heard this result. "Concubine Ning, it's in vain that I love you so much. You actually used a stillborn fetus to frame the queen." Concubine Ning cried so much that the pear blossoms were raining. "Your Majesty, I don't know this." The emperor's voice was cold. "Concubine Ning is very scheming. She framed the queen, demoted her to a talented person, and put her in the cold palace." When the queen heard this, she sighed in her heart that her beloved concubine was nothing more than this. After settling the matter, the queen resigned and went to Xiaoxiang Pavilion to eat hot pot. She discovered that hot pot is really addictive the more she eats it. "It's been a week since the last time I had hot pot, and I'm craving it." Shen Shuwei was worrying about how to have a bite of hot pot when the queen came. The queen first praised Shen Shuwei. If Shen Shuwei hadn't been observant, she would have been charged with murdering the prince today. Even if she has the support of her maternal clan behind her, she, the queen, will still be punished. Shen Chu smiled slightly and leaned into the queen's ear. "Queen, do you want hot pot for lunch?" The queen hit it off immediately after hearing this. "Okay, I also like hot pot." When the spring festival came, Shen Shuwei said very confidently, "The queen wants to eat hot pot." Chengzi looked at her little master's proud look and turned around helplessly to go to the kitchen. "Every time I eat hot pot, I get excited, and this time is certainly no exception." The queen took the phoenix chariot back to Fenji Palace again, and saw the dog emperor coming to her again. She had to get out of the phoenix chariot and hold her full belly to salute the dog emperor. The emperor did not show any airs and hurriedly stepped forward to support the queen and said warmly, "Come, I will help you go in and rest. Although he lost a son, God gave him another son, which was not a loss. But later, he discovered that the son was also fake. However, he was relieved to have twin grandchildren. The queen really couldn't figure out the dog emperor's urine properties, so she was extremely gentle and considerate to her these days. Lying on the bed at night and touching her belly, she thought the dog emperor wanted to say that she was fat again, and then gnawed her while he was disgusted. It turned out that there was no result. After the dog emperor touched it, he became honest. The queen didn't know that the dog emperor thought she was pregnant. Shen Shuwei was more than 3 months pregnant, but she still hadn't shown her pregnancy yet. Every day she thought of ways to get Chengzi to make this and that for her. It's a pity that the housekeeper is too strict. Xiao Jinyu hadn't seen the prince for 3 months, so she secretly climbed the wall to see Shen Shuwei. When Xiao Jinyu climbed the wall, Shen Shuwei was enjoying the cool under a tree. She saw a person falling from the tree. She looked closely and found that it was Prince Yu. Her eyes turned and she said with a smile, "Prince Yu, you came to see me, how can you come empty-handed?" Xiao Jinyu was stunned for a moment, then nodded in agreement with Shen Shuwei's words, "Sister-in-law, what you said makes sense, I'll go get something now." Shen Shuwei saw Xiao Jinyu climbing the wall and hurriedly reminded him, "I want to eat roast duck and meat pie." Xiao Jinyu just climbed up and heard Shen Shuwei's words. He didn't pay attention for a while and fell directly from the top of the wall. He actually wanted to eat roast duck and meat pie. Aren't these all outside the palace? Shen Shuwei felt sorry for Xiao Jinyu for 2 seconds when she saw this. A familiar voice suddenly came from behind, "Shen Liangdi, what are you doing?" Who else could it be except the queen? Shen Shuwei turned around and walked over, bowing, "Empress." The queen looked at Shen Shuwei's walking posture and felt something was wrong. "It's hot outside, let's go inside and talk first." When she walked in with Shen Shuwei, the queen couldn't help but stare at Shen Shuwei's walking posture. She felt that Shen Shuwei's walking posture was a bit like a pregnant woman. "Good night, my dears. Please support me with monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Iyun Si. Chapter 325. Chapter 325 Staring at the belly so happy. Shen Shuwei didn't know that the queen had been staring at her. She was just a little curious about the queen's strange walking posture today. She was crooked. She was wondering if the queen had a stiff neck last night. But as the queen, she couldn't say anything. All the way to the inner room, the queen's eyes were still staring at Shen Shuwei's walking posture. As a woman who gave birth to 2 sons and had seen many women pregnant, she was inevitably a little confused. Entering the inner room, there was not only a basin of ice cubes, but also a palace maid holding a round fan to fan the air, which was much cooler than outside. The queen sat on the couch, drinking the new tea brewed by Chengzi, and her beautiful eyes glanced at Shen Shuwei's belly from time to time. Shen Shuwei stood there straight, and nothing could be seen from her flat belly. Shen Shuwei found that the queen's eyes always swept over inadvertently. She subconsciously lowered her head to take a look at her clothes. Because it was too hot in summer, she deliberately asked Chengzi to make it simple and easy to wear, and the key was to keep it cool. "Is it inappropriate to wear like this?" The queen said calmly, "Shen Liangdi, sit down and talk." "Thank you." Queen Shen Shuwei sat down on the chair. Chengzi, who was standing by, found that the queen had been coming here quite frequently these days. This was Xiaoxiang Pavilion, adjacent to the Cold Palace, and the young lady was still under house arrest. Chengzi suddenly thought of the way the queen ate hot pot, which was similar to her young lady. Chengzi immediately understood that the queen was here to eat for free. The young lady was going to be so happy. As lunch approached, the queen drank tea and chatted with Shen Shuwei. She had no intention of leaving, and it was obvious that she wanted to stay for lunch. In fact, the queen and Shen Shuwei were both thinking about what to eat for lunch. Although they had eaten hot pot several times, they were addicted, but they wanted to change their taste after eating too much. What delicacies in the palace had the queen not eaten? She looked at Shen Shuwei. "Shen Liangdi, what do you want for lunch?" Shen Shuwei asked quietly, "Does the queen want to eat braised meat?" The queen was stunned at first, then she became interested. "Braised meat? What kind of meat is it? Why haven't I heard of it?" Shen Shuwei said, "It's delicious." These days, Shen Shuwei saw the method of making braised meat when she was flipping through the cookbook. When she saw the color picture, she was so greedy. But Chengzi didn't allow her to eat it. She said that it's better to eat fresh meat. The queen still believed in Shen Shuwei's taste, and her voice was a little expectant. "Then let's eat braised meat for lunch." Chengzi held her forehead, and the young lady had been talking about braised meat for 2 days. Chengzi didn't know how to make braised meat because she had never made it before, so Shen Shuwei followed her to the small kitchen to teach Chengzi. The steps of braising meat are actually quite simple, and the most important thing is the recipe of braised meat. The recipe was prepared by Shen Shuwei herself, and Chengzi watched from the side. Chengzi is smart and can learn it once she learns. An hour later, the hot braised meat was served on the table. Among the meats, there are braised pork elbows, pig ears, and pig heads. The vegetarian dishes include braised kidney tofu, kelp, bean curd, braised enoki mushrooms, braised lotus root slices, and braised peanuts. The queen looked at the table full of braised dishes and was speechless with surprise. It was her first time to see braised dishes. With curiosity and expectation, she picked up a piece of braised meat and put it into her mouth to chew. "It tastes good. What kind of meat is it made of?" Shen Shuwei just took a bite of the braised pork elbow, and when she heard the words, she looked up at the queen and said vaguely, "Pig head meat. Pork head meat?" The queen stared at the meat for a long time. If Shen Shuwei hadn't said it, she wouldn't have known that such delicious meat was made of pig head meat. The queen tasted every dish until the braised pork elbow. She saw Shen Shuwei start eating directly. After thinking that there were other people here, she didn't care about those rules, so she also picked up the braised pork elbow and ate it directly. There was indeed no one else here, only Qingying and Chengzi who served her closely. Chengzi saw with her own eyes how the noble queen was gradually led astray by her own mistress. Look at the way she gnawed the braised pork elbow, which was exactly the same as the mistress. Qingying had served the queen since she was a child. For so many years, the queen had always maintained the dignity, elegance, virtuousness, and gentleness that a queen should have. But when the queen was a teenager, she was also a girl who didn't care about trivial matters. This time, staying with Shen Liangdi for a while, she felt more relaxed. The queen ate braised food for the first time, and ended up eating too much again. Although her stomach was uncomfortable, she was extremely satisfied. Fortunately, the queen had foresight this time and came in a phoenix chariot. In the evening, the dog emperor came again, still caring for her and showing great concern. The queen thought that the dog emperor had a brain seizure and would be fine in 2 days. Until the queen heard that the dog emperor promoted a talented woman to a concubine. It was rumored in the palace that Hejiu was favored by the newcomer. She was named a concubine just after serving the emperor. She had a promising future and was the next Ningfei. The next day after Hejiu served the emperor, she had to come to pay respects to the empress. The empress looked at Hejiu kneeling on the ground. She was in her 20s, with a pretty face and a beautiful woman. No wonder the emperor liked her. The empress gave some gifts and let Hejiu leave. The empress felt that the dog emperor was really heartless. He had just lost his beloved concubine a few days ago, but he was not sad at all. Only the new people laughed, but the old people cried. Emperors have always been heartless, which is true. In the afternoon, the sun shone through the branches, and the cicadas kept chirping. Shen Shuwei was drowsy on the windowsill. "Sister-in-law, wake up." Shen Shuwei heard someone calling in a daze, and slowly opened her eyes, and saw a handsome face that looked like Xiao Jinyan, very close to her. He crouched down, looking cautious and afraid of being discovered. His peach blossom eyes were looking at her with a smile. Shen Shuwei rubbed her sleepy eyes. "You came empty-handed again." "How can I? I have to bring something to see my sister-in-law." Xiao Jinyu handed 2 large oil paper bags to Shen Shuwei, smiling. "Sister-in-law, we have all the roast duck meat patties you want." Shen Shuwei sobered up when she heard about roast duck meat patties. "This is more or less." She opened the oil paper bag, and the fragrance came out immediately. She broke off a duck leg and ate it. Xiao Jinyu saw that she was eating happily, so he asked, "Sister-in-law, did my brother write to you?" Shen Shuwei was eating so much that she puffed her cheeks and said, "Yes, what's wrong?" Xiao Jinyu was proud of himself. It turned out that he came to see his sister-in-law. The prince brother only wrote to his sister-in-law. "Did my brother say when he will be back?" "He said he will be back this month." Shen Shuwei ate a few bites of the duck leg, picked up the meat pie with his other hand and put it to his lips and took a bite. "I know my brother is great, those who say my brother is not good have no vision." Xiao Jinyu's peach blossom eyes were full of pride. Shen Shuwei couldn't speak with the meat pie in her mouth, so she had to nod vigorously to show her agreement. Xiao Jinyu glanced at Xiao Xiang Pavilion and said indignantly, "My father sometimes has no vision. Why did he lock you up in the cold palace?" "Don't worry, when my brother wins the battle and comes back, he will release you as soon as possible." Shen Shuwei said indifferently, "It's okay, I'm fine here. I see you are living well, not like those women locked up in the cold palace." For Xiao Jinyu, there is no difference between Xiao Xiang Pavilion and the cold palace. "My lady, something has happened." Shen Shuwei heard Chengzi's voice, and hurriedly wrapped the roast duck meat pie, stuffed it under the low table, and took out a handkerchief to wipe the oil on her mouth. Xiao Jinyu looked at Shen Shuwei's actions in confusion. "Sister-in-law, what's wrong with you?" "It's okay, go away quickly." Shen Shuwei pressed Xiao Jinyu's forehead and pressed it down. Chengzi hurriedly walked in. "My lady, concubine Su has contracted the plague. Ancient plagues are more terrible than cancer, highly contagious, and the chance of survival is very low." Shen Shuwei asked, "How could you be infected with the plague?" "I heard that it was contracted by using unclean things. Concubine Su came here yesterday." "My lady, will you?" Chengzi didn't dare to say more. "A reader asked me if I have other articles." "Yes, you can search for Gongzi Yunxi to read it." Ancient Chinese completed. "After I traveled through the book, I spoiled the violent regent." Modern Chinese member completed. "Madam, your boss is super paranoid. The wife in Mr. Chen's arms is a big boss. Run wild around the paranoid Mr. Fu." Free completed. Addicted to partiality, the reborn wife is so sweet. Good evening, my dears. The queen is still very smart, she can see the problem at a glance. I was almost out of votes yesterday. Please support me with monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. Come on. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 326. Yesterday, she stayed with concubine Su for a long time. If concubine Su contracted the plague, she would definitely not be able to escape. Shen Shuwei immediately checked his own pulse. Chengzi asked hurriedly, "Little master, how are you doing?" Shen Shuwei slowly raised his head, judging from the pulse, "I'm fine." Chengzi patted her chest and breathed a sigh of relief, "It's okay, I'm scared to death." Shen Shuwei looked at Chengzi and said, Bring your hand and I'll check your pulse. Changzi stretched out her hand with doubts and rolled up her sleeves, revealing a white wrist. Shen Shuwei placed 2 fingers on Chun 11's pulse. Concubine Su was diagnosed with the plague, and anyone in close contact with her could be infected with the plague. Changzi was extremely nervous. Shen Chu frowned slightly. You seem to be infected. Ah, Changzi took several steps back in fright. What should we do? Little master. Put on your mask and call the little rabbits over here. Shen Shuwei calmly took out the mask, handed 1 pack to Changzi, took out the disinfectant to wash his hands, and put on the mask himself. There will be some disinfectant and masks in the drawer, just in case. Changzi called them all over. Everyone was wearing a mask, and Shen Shuwei checked their pulse one by one. Not surprisingly, they were all infected. Changzi and the others were too scared to approach Shen Shuwei because Shen Shuwei was the only one who was not infected with the plague. Changzi stood outside the door and shouted, "Little master, what should I do?" Shen Shuwei took out some spiritual spring water from the space and poured it into the water cup. Lingquan water can detoxify hundreds of poisons, which means poisons, poisonous insects, poisonous snakes and other poisons. As for the plague, it is poisonous cells in the body. I don't know if it is useful. For now, let's treat the dead horse as a live doctor. After pouring the spiritual spring water, Shen Shuwei placed the disposable cup at the door and asked them to take it themselves. Drink this first and see if it helps. Changzi and the others all knew that Shen Shuwei had some medical skills, so as long as there was a way, they would try it. If they can't recover, they will definitely be taken out for isolation. Who will take care of the little master then? Changzi walked to the door, picked up the teacup, turned around and returned to where she was. Before Changzi could say anything, Little Rabbit and the others picked up the teacups and put them to their mouths, drinking them all in one gulp. They thought it was medicine, but after drinking it, they discovered that it was not like medicine, but a bit like mountain spring water, sweet and delicious. About an hour later, Shen Shuwei checked their pulse again. What Shen Shuwei didn't expect was that the spiritual spring water was actually useful. Spirit spring water can cure plague. You're all fine. False alarm. The real little master, Changzi almost jumped up with joy. She could continue to serve the little master without the plague. The little rabbit and the others also showed happy smiles. Shen Shuwei filled a bottle with some spiritual spring water and asked Qin Xiao to send the spiritual spring water to Yuxiang Palace. Changzi ran all the way back and gasped, "Little master, the East Palace is sealed, and there are many more imperial guards outside. Every little master is sealed in the room, and not even a fly can fly in. At present, I can't inform Qin Xiao." Shen Shuwei couldn't help but become a little anxious after hearing this. At this time, Yuxiang Hall. The entire Yuxiang Palace was infected with the plague, and all the servants and slaves were locked up in the house. Concubine Su's daily life was taken care of by Xiaohe. Xiaohe was afraid of contracting the plague, so he wrapped himself up tightly. He only entered the house when delivering food and water to Concubine Su, and usually stayed outside, waiting to prepare a prescription to cure the plague. Concubine Su was lying on the bed. She had a headache and a hot brain, and her whole body was weak. Her face was frighteningly pale, and her pink lips were dry and peeling because they had not drank water for a long time. "It's been an afternoon and I haven't seen Xiaohe come in. Xiaohe, give me a glass of water." Concubine Su called out several times, but no one paid attention to her. She was really thirsty, so she had to hold the bed with both hands, planning to get out of bed and pour some water for herself. She stood up holding onto the bed, but before she could take a step forward, her legs weakened and she fell to the ground. When the man in black came in, he saw her falling to the ground, walked over quickly, bent down, and picked her up. Concubine Su raised her head with difficulty, saw a pair of beautiful eyes, and was stunned when she saw the man in black. In the past, she was not surprised at all that he would suddenly appear in her bedroom. But now, she has contracted the plague, and the entire Yuxiang palace has been affected. The East Palace was sealed off, and it was impossible not to know that the man in black stayed in the palace for a long time. How did you come? She hadn't spoken for a day, her voice was extremely hoarse, and she was also extremely weak. I heard that you were infected with the plague. Come and have a look. The man in black carried her and strode to the bed, laying her flat on the bed. Concubine Su was so surprised that she was speechless. The man in black asked, "What did you want to do just now?" "Concubine, how come there is no one around to serve you?" Concubine Su also reacted at this moment and asked instead, "You knew I was infected with the plague, but you still came? Are you not afraid of catching the plague? The plague kills people." Concubine Su herself did not expect to contract the plague, never in her life. But she knew that the possibility of curing the plague was low. There was actually a big transition between the time when the imperial doctor said she had contracted the plague and now when she could speak calmly. The man in black pointed to the black hijab on his cheek and said, "I'm not wearing a hijab." Concubine Su was stunned for a moment, staring at the black scarf on the man in black's cheek, and had the urge to pull it off. She was a little curious, what did the man in black look like? Will it be proportional to his eyes and figure? Then you may get the plague. I am a martial artist, and my body is much stronger than yours, the man in black said calmly. Concubine Su widened her eyes, and her almond-shaped eyes stared at the man in black curiously. "Do you have the ability to be immune to all poisons?" The man in black leaned close to her ear, "My whole body is poisonous." Concubine Su glanced at the tall figure of the man in black and questioned, "Is it true?" The man in black said seriously, "Of course it is true, this is called fighting poison with poison." Concubine Su instinctively moved back, "Then stay away from me, what if I get poisoned?" The man in black said in a very cold-blooded tone, "It's too late, I just hugged you and I'm already infected." "You are so bad, what if I can be cured?" "In the end, I was harmed by you." "How old am I? I died young." Concubine Su was about to cry out of grievance. The man in black snorted, "Look at how little you can do." Concubine Su was stunned when she heard this, and felt that this sentence sounded very familiar. The man in black looked at Concubine Su, who was weak and ready to leave at any time, and became a little angry because of his words. "What did you want to do just now?" Concubine Su remembered how thirsty she was. "I want to drink water." The man in black came to the table without saying a word, picked up the teapot and poured a glass of water to the bedside, and easily helped Concubine Su up with one hand. "Drink it?" Concubine Su looked at the tea in front of her, raised her eyes to look at the man in black, and couldn't help crying. "The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 327. The man in black was stunned for a moment. "Why are you crying? Aren't you still dead?" "My noble concubine, my personal maid has been locked up. There is no one to serve tea or water, and I need you as an outsider to carry water." Concubine Su was so aggrieved that she was out of breath crying. His body was already extremely weak, but now it was even more frail. Why did the man in black think he was crying over such a trivial matter? "What's this? Drink some water." Concubine Su wiped away her tears with difficulty and said weakly, "I'm already in such a miserable state, why are you still so cruel to me?" "No offense to you, drink water quickly." The man in black handed the teacup to Concubine Su's mouth and softened his voice. Concubine Su had no strength in her hands, so she drank some water from the hand of the man in black and shrank her throat. When Concubine Su retreated, the man in black asked, "Have you drunk enough?" Concubine Su nodded. Only then did Hei put the teacup back on the table. Concubine Su was extremely afraid of being alone. She was afraid that no one would find her even if she died. She couldn't count on Xiaohe. Will you leave? The man in black found it funny. If I don't leave, will I still stay here? Concubine Su asked cautiously, then can you wait until I fall asleep before leaving? I'm afraid that I might die suddenly without anyone noticing. The man in black paused, looking at Concubine Su's weak and pitiful appearance, and felt a little unbearable. How is it possible that no one cares about you, Concubine Su? Don't think too much. Suffering from the plague is no different from dying in the eyes of outsiders. Concubine Su felt extremely wronged. I want to go home, I miss my father and mother. I miss Shen Liangdi. I don't know if she is infected or not. She is still pregnant. Concubine Su suddenly paused and almost spilled the beans again. The man in black looked at how pitiful Concubine Su was, and suddenly thought of Xiaju. Her parents and brothers were not around, and he didn't know if she would cry as hard as Concubine Su when she was wronged. I'll go over and have a look later. Then you go and come back later. At this moment, Concubine Su was extremely afraid that there was no one around her. Yeah, the man in black was also planning to go to Xiaoxiang Pavilion to have a look. After all, Shen Liangdi looked somewhat similar to Xiaoju. At this time, Xiaoxiang Pavilion. Shen Chuwei couldn't find Qin Xiao for help, and he couldn't tell people outside that he had spiritual spring water that could cure the plague. You can only figure it out on your own. Shen Chuwei put the cup containing spiritual spring water into the package, tied it in a knot and carried it on his back. Chengzi was extremely worried. Little master, you are still pregnant, how can you climb the wall? Just let the little rabbit go. Little rabbit said worriedly, little master, let the slave go? Shen Chuwei expressed doubt, can you do it? Little rabbit said, I have learned some martial arts, so I can climb the wall with no problem. Hearing this, Shen Chuwei took off the package from his body and handed it to Little Rabbit solemnly, then be careful and don't let anyone find out. My slave knows. The Little Rabbit took the package and tied it on his body, then went out and came to the wall. He climbed up the wall neatly, and then jumped off. Shen Chuwei saw it and couldn't help but give a thumbs up. Sure enough, I'm not bragging. Chengzi comforted him, don't worry, little master, the little rabbit will definitely be able to deliver the antidote safely to Yuxiang Palace. Shen Chu nodded slightly. What Shen Chuwei didn't know was that not long after Little Rabbit went out, he was discovered by the imperial guards and arrested and imprisoned. The man in black came to Xiaoxiang Pavilion in the dark and found Shen Chuwei sitting on the corridor. He seemed to be in good spirits and did not look like he had contracted the plague. The man in black looked at it for a long time before quietly leaving Xiaoxiang Pavilion. Being able to come and go freely in the closed East Palace is enough to show that the man in black has extremely high martial arts skills. Shen Chuwei was pregnant and had a sleepy temperament, so she couldn't bear to fall asleep for a long time. Chengzi kept watch for half the night and didn't see the little rabbit come back, so she was extremely worried. Next day, the first thing Shen Chuwei said after waking up was, "Is the little rabbit back?" Chengzi shook her head, "My lord, not yet. I haven't come back all night." Shen Chuwei was not stupid and roughly guessed that something might have happened. At this time, there was a sudden sound of a heavy object falling to the ground behind him. Shen Chuwei heard the sound and ran over holding up his skirt. Chengzi was startled when she saw this, and hurriedly chased after him, "My lord, please slow down." Shen Chuwei came to the corner and saw that the flower seeds that had been scattered had sprouted and bloomed, and each one was particularly beautiful. She plucked the flowers with her hands and saw a bald forehead, shining brightly in the sun. She hurriedly stepped forward and helped him up. "Wutan, why are you here?" Wutan clasped his hands together and said, "I heard that there was a plague in the East Palace, and the poor monk looked similar to Shen Liangdi, so I came over to have a look. The way you behave every time is too painful." Shen Chuwei raised his head and glanced at the 2-meter-high wall. "It hurt just thinking about it." Wutan smiled nonchalantly, "Shen Liangdi, are you okay?" Shen Chu shook his head slightly, I'm fine. Wu Tan looked at Shen Chuwei and saw that she looked good, and then he felt relieved, the poor monk will feel at ease. Don't run around. It will be bad if you catch the plague. Shen Chuwei knew that there was a plague in the entire East Palace, so he knew how serious the plague was. Wu Tan said, thank you Shen Liangdi for your concern. I came in a hurry this time and didn't bring anything to eat. Shen Chuwei waved his hand indifferently, it doesn't matter, I still know the priorities. Wu Tan walked up the wall just like when he came. Fortunately, he didn't fall like last time. Shen Chuwei went to the door to ask the guards about the little rabbit. The result is that she might be imprisoned. At this time, Fenji Palace. Mother, send the imperial physician to see Shen Liangdi, just in case, Xiao Jinyu said earnestly. The queen was worried about the plague in the East Palace. Xiaoxiang Pavilion was arranged by the Dog Emperor, so no news came out. I will take the imperial physician to Xiaoxiang Pavilion to see. Xiao Jinyu was relieved and hoped that his sister-in-law was okay. I will go too. The queen said, you stay here and wait for news from me. But, my son. Before Xiao Jinyu finished speaking, the queen threatened, if you say it again, I will not go. Xiao Jinyu immediately shut up when he heard it. The queen was satisfied and took the imperial physician to Xiaoxiang Pavilion. As soon as she entered the East Palace, the smell of burning mugwort was everywhere. The palace maids and servants were disinfecting on a daily basis. Xiaoxiang Pavilion is relatively remote, and not many people come, so the possibility of contracting the plague is very low. The queen came to Xiaoxiang Pavilion, and the huge crowd startled the people inside. Chengzi heard the noise, looked at the door, saw the queen came with the imperial physician, turned around and ran in. My lady, the queen is here. Shen Chuwei was sleepy, and Chengzi's hurried voice pulled her out of her dream. Why is the queen here? I don't know, the queen is also with the imperial physician, Chengzi said. Good night, my dears. Please support me with monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 328. Shen Chuwei got up from the couch upon hearing this and went straight to the door. From this position, she could see the situation at the door of Xiaoxiang Pavilion. The queen's bright phoenix robe shone wherever she walked, attracting attention. Looking at the posture of the guards at the door, the queen should not be allowed to come in. How dare they stop the queen? At this time, Fenji Palace. The queen had just left when the emperor came. As a result, he did not see the queen, but only saw Yuer in the bedroom. Xiao Jinyu saw the emperor coming and stepped forward to greet him, Father. The emperor asked, where is your mother? My mother went to Xiaoxiang Pavilion in the East Palace. Xiao Jinyu did not dare to lie to the emperor because it was easy to be exposed. What is she doing in the East Palace? Doesn't she know that there is a plague in the East Palace? After the emperor finished speaking, he walked out of Fenji Palace angrily. Go to the East Palace. Xiao Jinyu looked at his angry father and realized that he seemed to have done something bad. The queen has always been unimpeded in the palace. She was a little unhappy when she was stopped for the first time. Get out of the way. The guards bowed their heads and said, Queen, the emperor has ordered that no one is allowed to enter the inner courtyard of the East Palace. The queen thought of the dog emperor and couldn't help but mutter in her heart, then can you be sure that the people inside are okay? The guards said, replying to the queen, everything is normal inside. Queen, why are you here? The dog emperor's cold voice suddenly came from behind. The queen turned and looked behind her, and saw the dog emperor wearing a bright yellow dragon robe and walking quickly towards her. The queen stepped forward and bowed, Your Majesty. The emperor came over angrily and said, Queen, why don't you know the priorities at all? Come to the East Palace at this time, don't you know that there is a plague here? The queen said, I just came to see Shen Liangdi, who has been under house arrest for more than 3 months. Why do you care about others? Don't you know how important the body is here? The emperor stepped forward, took the queen's hand, and strode away. The dog emperor was very strong, and the queen could only be forced to keep up with his pace. Looking at the dog emperor's handsome face that was red with anger, she was stunned for a moment. After leaving the East Palace for a long time, the emperor slowed down his pace and softened his voice a little. Now is an extraordinary period, can you not come to Xiaoxiang Pavilion? These days, the queen ran to Xiaoxiang Pavilion every now and then, and he had never seen the queen go to him so diligently. It is easy for the emperor to know some news in the palace, it depends on whether he wants to know. The queen muttered in a low voice with some dissatisfaction, I just came to take a look, why is the emperor so angry? Even if the volume was low, the emperor still heard it and couldn't help getting angry. Do you still think you are a teenage girl? You don't know anything? Do you need me to remind you? The queen was stunned when she heard it. These days, the dog emperor really disliked her left and right, for fear that she didn't know that she was already in her 40s. The gentle care a few days ago was really fake. No, there is a new concubine. Look at her nose is not a nose, eyes are not eyes. The queen had had enough and shook off the emperor's hand. Your Majesty, I know I am old and don't need your constant reminders. I know everything. The queen bowed and said, I will take my leave. After that, she shook her handkerchief and left quickly. I cursed him 100 times in my heart, damn emperor. The emperor was also furious. He was obviously thinking about the queen. Could it be that a little infertile Shen Liangdi was more important than you, the queen? Watching the queen walk away without caring, thinking that she was still pregnant, how could she leave like this? The emperor hurriedly chased after her, Queen, slow down. Asterisk. The noisy door suddenly became quiet. Chengzi turned his head and looked at Shen Shuwei, my lady, the queen is gone. I originally wanted to rely on the queen to bring the medicine to concubine Su, but now it's gone. Shen Shuwei returned to the inner room and was a little worried. Chengzi comforted her, don't worry, my lady. Concubine Su is blessed by heaven, and she will be fine. Shen Shuwei suddenly asked, is Tao Liangyuan okay? I don't know, and I can't get any news now, Chengzi said. When night fell, an uninvited guest suddenly came to Xiaoxiang Pavilion, a man in black. Shen Shuwei stared at the man in black who suddenly appeared. He was tall and straight, and she knew at a glance that he was not someone to be trifled with. She subconsciously reached behind her. There was a frying pan behind her, which she didn't take away when she made pancakes during the day. She held the handle of the frying pan tightly. As long as the man in black dared to approach her, she would hit him with the frying pan without hesitation. Shen Liangdi, are you okay? The person who came was Qin Xiao. Because the East Palace was sealed, he could only come in like this. Qin Xiao was afraid that Shen Shuwei would not recognize him, so he pulled down his black face scarf. Shen Shuwei saw the handsome face under the veil and secretly loosened the handle in her hand. Qin Xiao, you are finally here, I am fine. That's good, I am relieved now. Qin Xiao secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Shen Shuwei was still thinking about concubine Su and wanted to send the spiritual spring water to her. By the way, which imperial physician is responsible for treating the plague? Treating the plague is a hot potato. No one in the imperial hospital dares to accept it. They all push it to imperial physician Wen. Imperial physician Wen is busy thinking about the treatment prescription every day and is already exhausted, Qin Xiao said. Shen Shuwei immediately thought of a good way to help concubine Su treat the plague, that is, to let Imperial Dr. Wen develop a prescription for the plague, so that no one would doubt it. I have a potion for treatment, please send it to Imperial Dr. Wen for me. Qin Xiao looked surprised, Shen Liangdi has a way to treat it. Of course Shen Shuwei turned to the inner room and took out the spiritual spring water prepared in advance. In order not to let people suspect, she took out a pen and paper to write a prescription, and turned to Qin Xiao. You give these two things to Imperial Dr. Wen, and use the water in this bottle to boil medicine to treat the plague. Qin Xiao looked at the water in the bottle and was a little curious. Is this water so magical? Shen Shuwei said, and Qin Xiao did it? Qin Xiao took the things out of Xiaoxiang Pavilion and went straight to the Imperial Hospital. Before leaving, Shen Shuwei also instructed, it must be given to concubine Su first. If Tao Liangyuan is infected, she must be kept close. In the past 2 days, the Emperor has issued an order, ordering Imperial Dr. Wen to develop a prescription for treating the plague within 2 days, otherwise he will be punished. At this time, Imperial Dr. Wen is under tremendous pressure. When he is overwhelmed, Qin Xiao comes uninvited. Imperial Dr. Wen is the prince's man, so the two of them speak directly. Guard Qin, why are you here? Imperial Dr. Wen stared at Qin Xiao with 2 thick dark circles under his eyes, as if he would fall asleep in the next second. Qin Xiao strode in, with a relaxed tone, of course I am here to help Imperial Dr. Wen solve the problem. Qin Xiao does not have medical skills, and Imperial Dr. Wen knows it. Guard Qin, can you develop a prescription for treating the plague within 2 days? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 329. Chapter 329. A very pleasant move. Shen Shuwei's pregnant belly was seen. Dr. Wen's tone was obviously unbelieving. Do you think I'm joking? Qin Xiao said and placed the 2 things in his hand in front of Dr. Wen. Dr. Wen looked at the 2 things in front of him and looked at Qin Xiao doubtfully. This is it. Prescription, use this water to boil medicine to treat the plague, Qin Xiao said. Dr. Wen picked up the prescription and took a look at it. There were only 3 medicinal ingredients on it. They were all precious, but they were only available in the hospital. Can this medicine cure the plague? He glanced at the water on the table again and expressed doubt. You shouldn't have gotten the folk remedy somewhere, right? Qin Xiao said, I don't know the folk remedy, and I don't know the medicinal materials. Shen Liangdi gave it to me. She said it can cure the plague. Dr. Wen was a little surprised when he heard this. If it were anyone else, he would definitely think it was a folk remedy, but Shen Liangdi's medical skills were better than hers, so she probably wouldn't use folk remedies. Qin Xiao added, Shen Liangdi also said that after the medicine is boiled, it will be given to concubine Su first. If Tao Liangyuan is infected, Tao Liangyuan will take it first. Shen Liangdi had a good relationship with Su's concubine Tao Liangyuan, and Imperial Dr. Wen still knew about it. Shen Liangdi said so it shouldn't be wrong. Dr. Wen Yu took the prescription and began to prepare the medicine, and then personally boiled the medicine with the water Qin Xiao brought. It took about 1 stick of incense to boil the medicine, divided it into 2 bowls, and gave them to concubine Su and Tao Liangyuan. Dr. Wen personally went to deliver the medicine. At this time, concubine Su's face was pale and bloodless. She couldn't even speak. She lay weakly on the bed, staring at the top of the bed with her eyes blankly. He thought that concubine Su would definitely die, so she didn't even go in and stood at the door cursing. It's really unlucky. It's hard enough working in the clothing bureau, but you have to come here to serve someone who is about to die. Sooner or later you are going to die, why not die sooner? The more he thought about it, the angrier he became, holding the pink flowers in front of him with his feet. Xiaohe's words reached concubine Su's ears verbatim. She stared at the top of the bed and cursed in her heart, you are the one who is going to die, and your whole family is going to die. She's not dead yet. Xiaohe, who was still cursing, was suddenly hit by something unknown in the mouth, and blood started to flow. He opened his mouth, and 2 teeth lay out mixed with blood. Xiaohe screamed in fright, "Ah!" The man in black threw the remaining small stones in his hand and turned around and entered the house. As soon as she came in, she saw concubine Su crying, but she couldn't make a sound. The man in black also knew that if no cure for the plague could be developed, concubine Su might not survive the next 2 days. When concubine Su saw the man in black coming, she opened her mouth, "Am I going to die?" The man in black stood upright in front of the bed. No matter how weak her voice was, he, who knew martial arts, could still hear her clearly. "Will not. Don't lie to me." Concubine Su calmed down and stared at the black scarf on the face of the man in black for a while. Then she said from the back room, "Can you take off the scarf and let me see? Anyway, I'm about to do it. Even if you die, you won't be afraid of me snitching." The man in black paused after hearing this. "Since you think you're going to die, why are you watching? Just think of it as my wish before I die." Concubine Su coughed twice and said weakly, "Thank you for taking care of me these 2 days." The man in black was silent for a long time, until concubine Su gave up and closed her eyes because she was too tired. A very pleasant male voice came from above. "If you are not dead, I will show you." Huh. Concubine Su slowly opened her eyes, but did not see the man in black. Just when she was wondering, the door was pushed open. I saw Dr. Wen slowly walking in with a towel on his cheek and a bowl of medicine in his hand. "Concubine Su, this is medicine to treat the plague. You will be well after drinking it." With the help of Dr. Wen, concubine Su drank the medicine into her stomach in a daze, and then fell asleep. When I woke up again, it was broad daylight. Dr. Wen was sitting on the bedside and had just checked concubine Su's pulse. Judging from the pulse, she was indeed mostly healed and the rest needed to be recuperated through cultivation. "Concubine Su, how do you feel?" Concubine Su was stunned for a long time before slowly sensing her physical condition. She was pleasantly surprised to find that her limbs were strong, her head was no longer dizzy, and her chest was no longer tight. "I'm much better. Dr. Wen's medical skills are really great." Dr. Wen smiled and said, "It was Shen Liangdi who asked Wei Chen to give concubine Su some medicine first. However, the credit for developing the prescription to treat the plague did fall on Dr. Wen Yu." Concubine Su asked, "Is Shen Liangdi okay?" Dr. Wen said, "Shen Liangdi is fine. There is nothing wrong with her." Xiaoxiang Pavilion. Shen Chuwei felt that she was very lazy after being pregnant. She was either lying on her stomach or lying down, and spent almost all her waking hours eating. Chengzi ran in happily, "Little master, Dr. Wen is here." At this time, only the imperial doctor could come in smoothly. As soon as he finished speaking, Dr. Wen walked in with a medicine box and took 2 steps forward to greet her, "Shen Liangdi." Shen Chuwei's sleepiness all ran away. "How is Su's concubine Tao Liangyuan?" Dr. Wen Yu said, "Shen Liangdi is at ease. Concubine Su and Tao Liangyuan are fine." "That's good." Shen Chuwei put her hand into the plate and picked up a piece of mung bean cake, put it into her mouth and took a bite. It was so sweet. "I still have to thank Shen Liangdi for the prescription. I was able to cure the plague and let the first-class credit go to the humble minister," Dr. Wen said humbly. Shen Chuwei said nonchalantly, "It's okay, we are all our own people." Dr. Wen understood what Shen Liangdi meant. If he was not from the prince, such a good thing would not happen to him. "I am here to see Shen Liangdi on the orders of the queen. Shen Liangdi is fine, so I will go back to report." The imperial Dr. Wen developed a prescription to treat the plague, which solved the problem of the spread of the plague and saved many people. The emperor not only rewarded gold and silver, but also appointed the imperial doctor as one of the candidates for the imperial hospital in the future, which was equivalent to the director of the imperial hospital. Within 3 days, the plague was almost completely solved, and the East Palace regained its former vitality. Shen Shuwei continued to eat and drink with peace of mind. At 4 months, her belly gradually showed signs of pregnancy, and it was obvious that her belly was bulging. Shen Shuwei's appetite seemed to be a little bigger than before, but Chengzi had been supervising her appetite, fearing that she would eat too much and the baby would be too big to give birth. For lunch, Chengzi stewed chicken soup and braised pork ribs. Shen Shuwei had a delicious meal, and her already bulging belly became even bulger. She wiped her mouth with a handkerchief and lay on the couch in a big letter position, which was very comfortable to sleep. Xiao Jinyu sneaked in to see if Shen Shuwei was as well as his mother said. The prince brother was not here, so as a younger brother, he should pay more attention to his sister-in-law. He lay on the windowsill and first saw Shen Shuwei's sleeping posture, thinking that women all sleep like this. Finally, his eyes were attracted by the bulging belly. Xiao Jinyu looked at the bulging belly curiously. Why was Shen Shuwei's belly so bulging? Is she sick? At this time, Chengzi came in holding clothes. Xiao Jinyu retracted his neck and slipped away quietly. He went straight to Fenji Palace to find his mother. My dear children, good afternoon. This chapter was added with the monthly votes and recommendation votes yesterday. Please support with the monthly votes and recommendation votes. The Queen will find out in the next chapter. Guess the Queen's reaction. The Prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Iyun Si. Chapter 330. He suspected that Shen Shuwei must be sick and seriously ill, that's why he was like this. He had to find his mother to see if anything happened, and the prince's brother would be sad. Xiao Jinyu's skill at climbing walls was superb, and he slipped out in no time. Chengzi put the clothes in the closet, turned around and came to the couch, looking at the little master's sleeping posture. After so long, the sleeping posture was still the same. She shook her head helplessly. Concubine Su had been recuperating for several days, and finally regained her former energy. She couldn't wait to come to Xiaoxiang Pavilion, waving her handkerchief. Caixia saw that her mistress was shaking the handkerchief as often as usual, and she was happy but nervous at the same time. I reminded him several times, slower and slower, to no avail. Shen Chu was sleeping soundly, but he always felt like there were flies buzzing in his ears, which was very annoying. Shen Liangdi, wake up. Shen Shuwei still showed no sign of waking up. Concubine Su turned her eyes and said close to Shen Shuwei's ear, it's time to eat barbecue. Shen Shuwei, who hadn't eaten barbecue for a long time, slowly opened her eyes when she heard the word barbecue. She rubbed it and looked around, where is the barbecue? After being together for so long, Concubine Su knew Shen Shuwei relatively well, and indeed this trick worked best. There's no barbecue, but there's me, she pointed at herself and laughed. Shen Chu was slightly disappointed and said, no, you're still greedy for me. Concubine Su patted her thigh and laughed, haha, just wait until the baby is born. Shen Shuwei looked at Concubine Su's action of slapping her thigh. It was over. She couldn't change this habit. Then she stared at Concubine Su a few more times. She was a doctor, and she could tell at a glance that Concubine Su was completely healed. How have you been these days? It's not bad, but the serving maid was not dedicated enough. Caixia was imprisoned again. I was not killed by the plague. I almost died of starvation and thirst. Concubine Su is still grateful that the man in black took care of her for 2 days, which can be regarded as half a good guy. Shen Shuwei looked at Concubine Su's sharp chin and felt sorry for her for a few seconds. No wonder you've lost weight. Concubine Su lowered her head and looked at herself. When she was putting on her clothes, she realized that the clothes were a little too big. I also discovered that it's a plague that even makes me lose weight. Shen Chu nodded slightly in agreement. How about Tao Liang Yuan? Concubine Su said, Tao Liang Yuan is doing very well. I think she will come to see you tomorrow. That's good. Shen Chu secretly breathed a sigh of relief. She only had two friends in the palace, concubine Su and Tao Liangyuan, and of course they were both doing well. Concubine Su sighed, after experiencing this life and death, I want to go home and miss my father and mother. After concubine Su mentioned this, Shen Shuwei also realized this problem. Concubine Su could not stay in the East Palace and waste her youth. Sooner or later she will leave the palace. Then when do you plan to leave the palace? I don't know yet, but I can't let you go. It's so distressing. Concubine Su held onto the small handkerchief, her eyes full of reluctance. Not to mention that concubine Su was reluctant to part with her, but neither was Shen Shuwei. Concubine Su suddenly raised her head and looked at Shen Shuwei. I decided to stay in the palace for a while longer. I also want to see my godson. After saying that, he lowered his head to look at Shen Shuwei's belly. As expected, Shen Shuwei didn't lie to her, and her belly could be seen a little bit. Shen Chu touched his belly slightly. He had indeed grown a lot during this period because he was twins. She approached Su Concubine's ear mysteriously and said, I have two in my belly. Concubine Su's eyes widened when she heard this, staring at Shen Shuwei's belly in disbelief, and finally couldn't help but take action. She touched her bulging belly and raised her head to look at Shen Shuwei in surprise. Are there really two of them? Shen Shuwei nodded vigorously. Concubine Su was extremely excited. Then don't I have two godsons? Two are two, but I'm not sure they are sons. No matter how good the medical skills are, it is impossible to determine the gender by taking a pulse. It must be a son. That is His Highness's eldest son. He will be happy to hold two children at once. After Concubine Su finished speaking, she said angrily, let the blind imperial doctor see that you are not only pregnant, but you can also hold two children at once. And the emperor, let him open his eyes and see, then I don't regret it. After seeing him, does my face hurt? Shen Chu suppressed a smile and cooperated. Concubine Su felt that this was not enough. When the babies are born, they will not be allowed to be seen by the emperor, nor will they be allowed to be held by him, so that he can covet them. But his emperor, we can't hold him if we don't give him a hug, okay? One sentence directly brought Concubine Su back to reality. That's right. At this time, Fenji Palace. Xiao Jinyu was a little anxious as he waited. Why hasn't the queen come back yet? King Yu, the queen has gone to the royal study and will be back soon, the palace maid replied. The queen was on her way back, looking a little unhappy. She thinks the dog emperor is sick. He called her over and asked Hijiu to come over. Look at Hijiu's proud little look, which is comparable to that of concubine Ning back then. She is a majestic queen, and she doesn't even bother to compete with a little Jiu. Dog emperor. The queen returned to Fenji Palace with a cold face. When she saw her son, her anger softened a little. Fortunately, her son was not like a dog emperor. You were, come to visit your mother. Xiao Jinyu finally waited for the queen and walked over quickly, mother. When Xiao Jinyu came closer, the queen saw that her son's forehead was covered with sweat. She took out a small handkerchief and wiped the sweat on his forehead. She found that her son had grown very fast in the past 2 years and was almost catching up with his brother. What's wrong? Why is there so much sweat on your forehead? Xiao Jinyu grabbed the queen's arm and said in an urgent voice, Mother, something big has happened. The queen paused in her wiping movements and asked doubtfully, what big thing happened? Why hasn't I heard anyone mention it before? Xiao Jinyu said, Shen Liangdi is sick. The queen said, weren't you fine in the past 2 days? Why did you get sick? How did you know? Shen Liangdi's belly suddenly became very bulging. Xiao Jinyu made a gesture with his hand, looking anxious. I heard that due to some disease, the belly will become bigger, and if you are not careful, you will die. The queen looked at her son's actions, especially when he gestured with his belly, and a picture appeared in her mind, that was Shen Liangdi holding out her belly. It clearly looked like a pregnant belly. She also thought that some time ago, Shen Shui's walking posture did look a bit like a pregnant person. She suddenly became excited. Could it be that Shen Shui was pregnant? Xiao Jinyu was so anxious that he was like an ant on a hot pot. He held the queen's hand tightly and said, "Queen Mother, why don't you speak? Shen Liangdi is sick. Send the imperial doctor over to take a look quickly, so as not to delay the treatment." The queen looked at her son's anxious look and didn't know what to say, but she would know if he was pregnant or not by going over and taking a look. "I'm going to go take a look now and see how anxious you are." "Then Queen Mother, go now." Xiao Jinyu pulled the queen out and walked out.